I've seen it a lot on the back of cars, a sign that simply says, freedom isn't free. That statement, short as it is, packs a whole lot of meaning. We as Americans love our freedom. We celebrate it with enormous festivities, especially in the summer months, from May to September. We sing and write songs about freedom. We built monumental statues dedicated to freedom. We send our young men and women to fight and die in the name of freedom. We as a nation are incredibly divided at this particular juncture in history. But the one thing I think that 99% of us will agree upon is that we are all in favor of freedom. And you might then ask, why then are we so divided if we all as Americans particularly are so enamored of this ideal of freedom? Well, for one, freedom works great as a metaphorical concept to say that we all believe in, but when the rubber hits the road and we try to spell it out in law and practice, what freedom is, well, we all have our own opinion. For some, it's freedom to do what we want when we want. For some, it's freedom to be able to be free from all economic pressures. For some, it's the freedom to engage in business without restraint. And the thing is all of those can be in competition with each other. You might say our freedom prohibits us from agreeing on what freedom is, causing us to then be, in fact, less free. And this is a fair warning at this point, and of all Sundays for me to do this, the Sunday where we had a 25-hour day somehow magically appear out of nowhere. This is the day for me to do it, because hopefully you all had good sleep last night. This is one of those that might run your brain in pretzels a little bit. Because in one of the great paradoxes of history, we are without a doubt the freest nation on earth. I will not dispute that. I think that is very much true. And yet we cannot agree on either what freedom is or what its purpose is. Because for many of us, freedom is its own purpose. It is an end in and of itself. It is the thing to strive for attaining, and once you have it, there's nothing else beyond that. That is the end goal. Well, if you're a materialist that believes that the only real things are the things that we can feel, smell, taste, touch, and hear, you will probably agree with that way of thinking. The Epicureans of ancient Greece, the empiricists of the Enlightenment, all thought this way, that the most important thing was for people to be free, to be who and what they wanted to be, as long as it didn't interfere with the freedom of somebody else. And that is where we oftentimes run into a catch-22, because whenever I say, I'm free to have your car, then we have a problem, because then that imposes itself upon my freedom, and we end up with a clash of desires. And there is some use in that notion, the idea that freedom is to self-actualize. But unfortunately, that idea of freedom is entirely and totally self-centered. Its focus is on the individual self being the center of existence, and that there isn't a deeper level of meaning to life or freedom. We have it enshrined in our founding documents, and yet we can't really agree on what it is. It's an idea that we all know is important, Freedom has not only in our country, but the whole world, though, become a broken signpost. It has been so distorted by commercialism, nationalism, and yes, even human religion, that we don't know what to do with it or really what it is. But take heart, there is one who does, and he comes to make you truly free. So there is an important context to Jesus' ministry, especially the Passion. And please, please do not come away from this thinking that I deny the doctrine of substitution or atonement. Although if we ever sat down and discussed what those things actually mean, you might end up with a little bit different understanding of it than you used to. But I am not here to deny the doctrine of the atonement. But it is very interesting that the day on which Jesus chooses to do his great work is not the traditional day of atonement in the Jewish religion. Forgive me, I cannot remember the name of it, but it is not that day. Yom Kippur, there, thank you. And it's a different time of year. He does it on Passover. Passover is the focus. Passover is the great festival celebrating God as bringing freedom to the people and overcoming Pharaoh, and in particular, the spiritual dark powers that he represented of tyranny, idolatry, and pleasure at the expense of others. The Passion is placed very much in the context of liberation. How does this liberation work? And what is Jesus liberating people for? Because he doesn't just liberate them to say, all right, you're free now go do whatever you want. But there's a purpose. And the liberation that he does will look quite different from what we expect or what the people expected that back then, because what they expected was a king on a white horse to come, wipe out the Romans, and then they'd have their kingdom back, and then that was going to be the end all. That was the goal. But Jesus begins having a discussion with people, and it starts out saying these were the people who followed him, who believed in him. But if you read chapter 8 all the way to its end, it's going to end with a whole bunch of those people being ready to stone him. Particularly when he says before Abraham was, I am. That is both political and religious dynamite to make that kind of a statement. But the passage that we read today, Jesus is talking about saying, if you listen to my words, do what I'm calling you to do, you will be free. And the people protest in vain about their freedom. They say, we've never been a slave to anybody. Well, because, first of all, their whole history goes back to their enslavement in Egypt. And then to going into exile in Babylon. And then now they are an occupied people, which is not free. But Jesus ignores all that. He doesn't, he could have sat there and ripped them over that, but he doesn't. Instead, he goes for the heart of it. And he explains what the true dark power is that humanity needs liberated from. Sin equals slavery. And here's how it works. When we give our devotion to something or some idea or a desire or what have you, when we give our devotion to that thing, rather than rightly where it goes, which is to God only, that is when we sin. We have allowed something else to have dominion over us. A couple examples. Theft, we place the thing that we steal above all else. Lust, essentially the same, and so on. Slavery then ultimately is a heart issue. When we are devoted to anything other than God, it will demand more and more of our attention, our life, our resources, at the expense of our families, our relationships, our work, and everything else. Hence the reason why we say the ultimate price, the ultimate wage of sin is death. Because the thing that we idolize over God will ultimately ask for more and more until there is nothing left of us, either in body or in soul. It will demand everything. And this is what Jesus came to confront. Ironically, Caiaphas admits this when the Sanhedrin begin to plot Jesus' death. He says it's better for one man to die for the nation than to lose our nation and holy place. But for Caiaphas, freedom is coached in terms of personal power and prestige, and the prestige of their holy place and perceived holy status. In fact, Caiaphas is enslaved to a false idol of freedom that cherishes place and tradition above all else to the point that they are willing to sacrifice an innocent man. But going on, John points out that it won't just be for the nation, but for all God's people that Jesus will die to draw them together. This is the real freedom. To be free, to be loved by God, and then in turn love God and love each other. Think of the freedom that you felt when you first gave your life to Christ. Or if you can't remember that far back, think of the freedom that this phrase makes you feel. For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son. So we begin to get to the crux of it. Freedom is best experienced in being loved and loving. So to close us out and give us a good mental image of how this works and the freedom that Jesus gives, what it looks like, let us look at Peter. Peter was free to follow or not follow Jesus on the night that Jesus was betrayed. And Peter chose to follow. He went. And then he was free to either admit or deny that he knew Jesus. And he chose to deny. And he became enslaved by guilt. Fast forward, Jesus, after the resurrection, talks to Peter by the sea. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Then feed my sheep. Notice Jesus restores Peter's status as a free follower of Jesus by inviting him to love and be loved. Interestingly, this kind of freedom from jealousy, freedom from hatred, freedom from misogyny and bigotry, and all of the other nasty things results in us being willing to die, like Jesus did. Jesus was in fact the freest human being who ever lived, and He willingly laid His life down to save us. He was not bound by fear. He was not bound by a desire to cling to His life, but He gave it freely. And that is true freedom. He willingly laid His life down to save us. We in turn are called to follow, to let go of our lives, to be willing to lose them so that we might have them secured eternally in Jesus. Jesus proved death to be a hollow threat, and in this way we are free to follow Him all the way to the cross if necessary, as Peter did, knowing that even death will not separate us from God's love. God's freedom frees us to serve, it frees us to love, and it frees us to be loved. Yes, Your freedom was not free. And yes, let's go and celebrate it. Amen.
Amen.